Welcome to Implicating the Real. My name is Michael. I'm joined by my good friend Joe.
Hello.
What's up, Joe? How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
And Liana is back as well.
Yep.
Glad to have her. How are you?
Good.
Good. So today we're talking about Chapter 5 of Seth Speaks, How Thoughts Form Matter, M-coordinate points.
M-.
I feel like that's an M-, right? The long...
Yeah, the long line. Yeah, that's an M-.
I think we're going to have to try to get into like how he's grouping these together too. I think that might be kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was the first thing I wanted to talk about too.
Okay, what do you got?
So when we read the intro, I made a whole like chapter list. Because in the intro, Seth goes through and says, like, this is what I'm going to talk about in this chapter. This is what I'm going to talk about in this chapter.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about, like, it's crazy how Seth, like, made the book in, like, one shot, essentially. It just, like, dictated it straight out. Didn't have to go back and re-edit it all. Because it's like, oh, it's like an interdimensional being. Like, he can already know what he already did and know what he's going to do type thing.
Yep.
So I've been putting the outline titles that I sort of like ad hoc put together for kind of how he described each one of the chapters. My chapter 5 title has How Seth Met Jane and Rob, is what he says he's going to talk about in this chapter. Yeah.
Do you feel like that's been covered already in a different chapter, or maybe it's coming up?
I mean, we had that part where we talked about him crawling through Jane's like window, right? That one.
I feel like that was early on.
That was really early on. That might have been in the intro, actually.
You look puzzled.
I don't remember
the psychic warp. He uses a window analogy.
Oh, I thought you meant Rob crawling through Jane's.
Maybe when they were teenagers.
Yeah.
Seth describes analogously that's how he connects through Jane's consciousness. That more or less we all have these structures, but most people are kind of closed off, and Jane
left the
window open for Seth. But I know Joe got a kick out of it because it just seemed a little creepy.
Well, and it's like if you imagine the like bald, rotund man that we now imagine Seth as, like crawling through your window, you know?
It makes me think of like cartoons from my childhood where there's just like a pie on the windowsill that's just like attracting like a bear or something, and Seth is just like, oh, an open window.
Like feet are floating off the ground, getting carried along by the scent vapors.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the last chapter we sort of talked about the initial meeting with Seth and Jane and that like reading group, right?
Oh yeah. So I don't know. Do you remember like Joe brought this up because I was kind of skipping the parentheticals, but they called themselves the Five. It was a group of sci-fi writers.
Oh, yeah.
It's just mentioned briefly in this book. I don't know if it's ever covered again, but...
Yeah, do you know anything about the Five?
No.
Okay, we got to do an episode on the Five. I'm so intrigued by the Five.
Let's do some Googling, Joe.
Yes.
Bring us this information.
I'll bring you some info. So, like, I guess we talked about that a little bit. It's just interesting because then I was like, oh, thoughts form matter and coordinate points. And then it was like, I didn't really talk about that at all.
Yeah. Well, he mentioned somewhere that, like, he has it all planned out, but there's always room for spontaneity. And
yeah,
if you're noticing this already, you'll probably notice it even more about how often Seth will say, like, we'll get into this in more detail later. And a lot of it just never comes.
Right.
I mean, maybe partially because of Jane's early demise. I don't know. But like, we're going to get into coordinate points in this chapter, but he kind of was hinting that like he could write a whole book on just that. That would have been fascinating to me.
Oh yeah. This stuff is cool. I was so happy reading what this chapter was going to be about. It's like my favorite part of like weird esoteric stuff.
And there's the part of my ego that like when he mentions something like, you know, like he mentions the Minneapolis area, I feel like I'm getting a little pat on the head. Or
Minneapolis mentioned.
Yeah.
We have our psychic energy portal just right next door.
Like elsewhere, he mentions like how, you know, this sort of our version of physical life here is like a very, very challenging one in like Sethian cosmic terms. It also makes you feel like, oh, we're actually it feels like another little pat on the head. Like you're doing something really tough here. Good job.
Yeah, your struggles matter.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well, he starts out comparing the way we speak verbally and uses that as an analogy of how we're creating physical reality.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
I thought it was really interesting. I went back and forth on whether I liked how Seth was talking about it or didn't like how Seth was talking about it, because there's a whole idea of information transition as opposed to containment of information.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I suppose I would see it as the same thing, right? Where it's the words are transmitting the information, which means that the information of the page is contained in the words, right? The pattern of the words being recognizably the letters that we know in English is the information in one way of looking at it. Right? But then I was trying to look into okay, well, how do you actually talk about the idea of transmission, right? What does that actually mean? And I think it might be the correct use of transmission, where it's there is something that can be encoded, and this is a way of encoding it, right? So that it can then be transmitted. So I think that the way Seth is talking about information coding and transmission makes sense.
Yeah, interesting.
Or I'll be less oblique and actually talk about what's in the book, because I know for the reader or the listener, that's probably what the hell did you just talk about?
Maybe we can start by just reading some quotes, and then the listener will have a little better context here. I mean, I can start. He just kind of reiterates this for a few paragraphs, but the printed line does not contain information. It transmits information. Where is the information that is being transmitted then, if it is not upon the page? I'm skipping ahead a little bit. The letters upon the page are symbols, and you've agreed upon various meanings connected with them. You take it for granted, without even thinking of it, that the symbols, the letters, are not the reality, the information or thoughts which they attempt to convey. Then he goes on to say, now in the same way, I'm telling you that objects are also symbols that stand for reality, whose meaning the objects, like the letters, transmit. The true information is not in the objects any more than the thought is in the letters or words. Words are methods of expression, so are physical objects in a different kind of medium.
Yeah. That one was weird to me. It seems like something that you should not read if you are schizophrenic, right?
Probably not.
Where you're saying oh, the objects in my reality are actually encoded messages that I need to decipher.
Yeah.
That,
You're right. And, as someone who works with some people that are suffering from schizophrenia, there's a lot of things that almost anything can be troubling in this way. I was speaking to a patient the other day who was asking me if I read today's paper, and I'm like, no, I haven't gotten around to it. And then I asked him about what he read so far, and he's like, I'm looking for the password.
Right.
But I didn't find it. But it made me think of, this is coming from my idea or conception of this has been influenced by my introduction to Seth, that we get these strong feelings of certainty. This is what's happening to some extent with someone who's schizophrenic, is they're so certain that something like this is happening. And I feel often there's actually some truth there, but the interpretation is wrong. And I feel this is kind of the way our religions get distorted. There's some people that are so emotionally certain about some truth. They're really connecting to something real. But the problem is with the instantiation. It's that the distorted way it comes out, and then just the certainty applies to the distortion, and that's where we get our problems.
Yeah, you get 80% of the way there usually.
Yeah. I mean, it's really behooves you to be humble and to re-examine the way you're interpreting things, and to examine your thoughts and your certainties, and
Yeah.
It's a hell of a project when you think about it, trying to get to the truth. In some sense, that's kind of the subject of our podcast here.
True.
What's really real?
What is really real?
But I think we should try to chew on this more, because this is kind of he just kind of repeats this for the first part of the chapter. So can you get back into what you're saying, Joe, about your conception of words and their meanings, or like, and then we can
Yeah.
try to like make the jump from that into objects.
Because there's a certain sense in which like part of this is required or is leaning on the idea that like there are words on the page. The words are standing in for an idea. And then that reflexively implies that that idea has to exist somewhere else besides the page, right?
Yeah.
But like, if you think about it, you could, it's like a statistical improbability, but it's like the monkeys and typewriters thing, right? Like, you can find a naturally occurring pattern that is not intended, it just is a pattern, right? And then like, what information ends up being in a certain reading is just a certain recognizable pattern in the way the world is, you know? Like, for example, like you can look at geography, since we're talking about geography in this chapter a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like you could look at geography and you could see that there's sort of like this very regular pattern of like ridges in the environment that you're living in. You know, if you're surveying the land, you're like, whoa, there's like, you know, it's however many like kilometers between these ridges, and it's like very regular, like more so than I would think it is. There's information here because there's a pattern,
Right.
and that information could tell you like, oh, there's this certain type of tectonic activity that compressed it, right? And you can get something out of the information. You can like make a read of the information, but that doesn't mean that somebody was sitting there, you know, like writing on the ground, you know, like scrunching it together. Like there doesn't have to be intentionality behind information is sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah, or not the intentionality that you're perceiving, perhaps.
Yeah, like information can sometimes be evidence of intentionality, but not always.
Yeah, I just think in our limited perspective, like it's hard to say yes or no whether there's intentionality there or not. But like we can kind of say with our verbal language, right, that it's kind of, we talked about this a little bit prior, but like it's one of those things that's just arbitrary. We're agreeing that this word means this.
Right.
And the idea existed before we had symbols to write it down, to transmit it.
Right.
Or
exactly.
even maybe phonics to communicate it verbally, right?
Yeah, because the division of the sections into like sounds that are recognizable is also kind of arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean, we see that plainly when we look at other languages, right? There's similar or the same ideas that are used in different symbols, different sounds.
Or some sounds that just they're not recognizable as different from one another. You know, like in a lot of languages, like the English, like R sound isn't recognized. Like it's not like a meaningful distinction.
Right, but yeah, I'm just saying that like we can see how like the same ideas exist and are expressed in these different ways.
Yeah, like the possibility of translating between languages implies that there's something else going on. And yeah, there was, you know, that was my initial thing reading through here. But then there's this one quote that I think like clarifies a lot and makes it so it's a lot more like understandable. Because Seth says, though you hear the words and recognize their appropriateness, and though they may more or less approximate an expression of your feeling, they are not your feeling. And there must be a gap between your thought and your expression of it.
I had this one highlighted too.
Yeah. So essentially, like, that is pointing to, like, the kind of relationship that's happening when we encode stuff into language on a page, right? Where there's sort of the initial emotive, like, experience, and then that can never be translated completely into like linguistic form.
Yeah.
But like the linguistic form is an encoding of certain parts of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he used pretty strong language when he says there must be a gap between. And it reminds me of, we spoke a little bit last time. I don't know if last time will be last time to the listener, unfortunately. But we were speaking about art and like the, you know, the formation of art, or these abstract feelings and ideas, and trying to express them in physical form. And we're talking about that same thing, like that the artist has this discontent. There's always a discontent with the final form because it can never achieve that perfect translation.
Mm-hmm.
I thought him pointing out this gap is kind of the same phenomenon, you know, in just, you know, verbal meaning. And I thought it's a good way to illustrate. We were also talking about how we've taken on this limitation from like a macro point of view. Like, you know, if we're coming from the idea of infinity or all that is or God. And now we're kind of like this pluralized individuality, and we're having experiences as these finite subjective beings. That like, this is part of, we're doing that, that creative dilemma. We're like trying to cut ourselves off. We're trying to do something impossible. And it's easy to see like with this gap, because there is that gap that must be there between the expression of the idea, that we get all these different versions of things. And that can be beautiful. You can think of like 5 poets trying to express the same feeling. Do you want to just pick the best one and never have the rest, or do you want to have the rest? Like, I think it's cool that we have this creativity that can, because of this gap, this error almost, if you want to call it that, there's a lot of creativity that comes out of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Right? Like the sort of limited range of the lexicon that you're dealing with is like sort of the material you end up working with. It's almost like the same as like if you're doing like a collage. It's like you're starting with already pre-made images and you're kind of cutting and pasting them as best you can to create something.
Yeah.
Right? But you're at some sense you're working with prearranged material,
Yeah, your medium is always going to be more limited than what you're starting with, which really, to me, asks the question, like, what are these things we're starting with? These thoughts, these emotions, like we can't really grasp them in their full extent, I feel like.
Yeah, we're going to get into, that's like the next step of like kind of the description, right?
I mean, it comes into play.
Did you have anything on the linguistic stuff before we move?
I did. When you were saying that words are more or less arbitrary, I can see what you mean, but it reminded me of something that I read, where Seth seemed to imply that it wasn't truly arbitrary.
Was he talking about telepathy?
No, he was talking about sound. I have it pulled up in Unknown Reality Volume 2. He says, each symbol in the alphabet stands for unutterable symbols beneath it. Sound itself, even without recognizable words, carries meaning.
And yeah, can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah.
Please?
Each symbol in an alphabet stands for unutterable symbols beneath it. Sound itself, even without recognizable words, carries meaning. And then later he says, certain sounds, inflections, and expressions taken together have a more or less precise meaning. Implying that like words are not truly arbitrary.
Yeah.
So, but he's not saying they're not arbitrary to some extent, or they couldn't be in the way we use them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But there's some,
Like I said,
there's
in
some
the body.
non-arbitrariness to it, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just pointing out that because it's one of the aspects of like creating our own reality that we can actually like recognize. Like we were talking about like money or political power. These are just kind of like things we agree on. Of course there's people that disagree with that, but we have systems in place that are enforced by those who do agree. Like, if you don't agree that the president is really the president, you might get arrested.
Yeah,
So
sovereign citizens usually do still have to pay whatever court fees they get assigned.
right. So it's because enough people are agreeing, things operate this way. And yeah, I just feel like it's helpful when you're trying to understand how we create our own reality, that like we're already doing a lot of this, like cooperating upon like following these rules of this game.
Yeah, right. The thing that what you just brought up reminded me of is, have you ever heard of the Kiki Bobo experiment?
No.
Oh, have you heard of this?
Never heard of it.
Oh, fantastic.
I feel like I would have remembered that title.
There's this linguistic experiment where I can draw Kiki and Bobo for you really quick, right? The beauty of the non-visual medium where I'm going to draw something on a page and you're going to have to describe it to the audience, right?
Maybe I know this if you're drawing it, but I don't know it by name for sure.
I remember it now.
This is riveting.
Okay. One of these figures is named Kiki and the other one is named Bobo. Which one's Kiki and which one's Bobo?
It's obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Joe drew 2 objects. One looks more like a star and one looks more like a cloud.
Yep.
One has spikes and one has puffy parts. And I would say Bobo is obviously the cloud one and Kiki's the
spiky one.
Yeah. So that just kind of illustrates your point, or Seth's point there, that it's not really arbitrary. I'm seeing this when I'm editing this podcast. I'm watching like waveforms and like, sometimes there's like a sharp noise that I'm taking out and it's the spike, but sometimes that's just the K sound.
Yeah. Right.
Kiki sound.
Yeah, and like there is a maximum frame in which these sounds can be made, and the sounds are distinct from one another in, like you're talking about, the waveform, like the actual physical representation of what they are. So there is a sense in which they are non-arbitrary, right?
That's a good point. That helps me. It clarifies it a lot.
Yeah.
Do you remember more of like what Seth was getting into in that? Like, I mean, not that we have to go further down that road, but I feel like there's a lot there. The reason I asked you about telepathy, and I don't know, was it earlier in this book, but I felt like he made the point somewhere where basically the reason we actually do understand each other so well is because telepathy is actually operating like at the inner sense level.
Yeah. I mean, I've read books where people are regressed and they remember encounters with aliens or extraterrestrials, and a lot of people who just remember those outside of regression will say that communication was like instantaneous and telepathic.
Yeah.
They were told like, you're fine, we're not going to hurt you, stuff like that.
Yeah.
When people flatline and come back after being resuscitated and they share their near-death experience, often they say that the beings they meet on quote-unquote the other side also communicate telepathically, where their mouth doesn't move, but when this person asks a question, they're just able to essentially like download the answer, the answers transmitted. And I vaguely remember once somewhere Seth said that interspecies communication will be part of our future, like communicating with animals and stuff. And people today who call themselves animal communicators, I've read a few books written by these people teaching folks that like everyone can do it. It's just part of your natural heritage. A lot of children do it naturally. And it's basically just telepathy. You form an image in your mind, you just kind of like blast it. Or they say you can just speak to the animal in English and they'll understand because of the underlying reason why language works is just telepathy.
I feel like a lot of pet owners might be like nodding their head right now because I feel like that's a common experience. I mean, I've had that with like friends and partners and family members, and I think it is intuitive once you open up to that. And you've read a lot of, like you said, you kind of got started into this with like NDE stuff.
Yeah.
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 Very cool. I mean, I feel like a lot of times, getting into Seth has made me really, acutely trying to focus on my dreaming abilities and recording them. And I feel like that's a lot of the trouble recording my dreams is translating it back into time. Because that's kind of the difference we're talking about here. Telepathy is kind of that instant communication where verbal, everything has to line up in a train, basically, in a line. And I feel like, that moment before I'm fully awake, I have a really clear idea of what my dream was or what was happening. And then as soon as I try to put it into words, and this is coming from someone who fancies himself as a writer, it's just terribly frustrating. It's just like you lose part of it. And, to some extent, that's the gap he's talking about, but I want to narrow that gap.
Right, yeah.
Before we get past this, we need to try to like understand how he's translating that analogy to symbols,
right,
or to objects, physical objects and events.
Because it says,
did you have something before that?
No, I was just going to move us on to that.
Yeah.
Because there's this small paragraph that I'll read. It says, the familiarity of speech begins to vanish when you realize that you yourself, when you begin a sentence, do not know precisely how you will end it, or even how you form the words. You do not consciously know how you manipulate a staggering pyramid of symbols, picking from them precisely those you need to express a given thought. For that matter, you do not know how you think, right? And then the metaphor, right, because we're talking about language as sort of the metaphor for like the physical world.
Yeah.
He goes on to say, you do not know how you translate these symbols onto this page into thoughts and then store them or make them your own. Since the mechanisms of normal speech are so little known to you on a conscious level, then it is not surprising that you are equally unaware of more complicated tasks that you also perform, such as the constant creation of your physical environment as a method of communication and expression.
Yeah. At the bottom of the page, he says how pleased he is with this analogy.
He's so happy with himself. I love it.
Well, and I see what he means, because like it seems kind of obvious when he's talking about it, but it's also like, it makes, like I said, it makes you really question, like, what is that initial thing? Like, we know that the word isn't the idea or the meaning, but like, it kind of gives us this like false idea that we do know what it is, right?
I suppose I have this example.
Or if you know what ideas are, Joe, I want to hear a definition.
Well, it's not that. It's more of a quibble with the form of the argument, right? It's a fallacy argument.
All right,
right?
let's get into it.
My example is, are you familiar with harps? Have you ever played a harp, Michael?
I don't believe I've played a harp, but I'm familiar. I'm a Joanna Newsom fan.
Got you. But would you be able to tune a harp if you found one?
Very poorly, maybe.
So, since you do not know how even to tune a harp, of course you couldn't ever know how to tune a car, right? That's kind of the form of the metaphor that we're getting.
This is playing on the different usage of the word tune.
Yeah. It's saying like you're making this metaphor of like you can like tune an engine and you can tune a harp. And we know that in both cases, tune has something to do with getting the object to work in the intended way. And then you're saying, well, since you don't know how to do it in one case, you can't do it in the other, right? See how one is more complicated than the other? You can't even do the simple one, so how could you do the hard one? But they're different skill sets.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that therefore like analogies.
Therefore, like there's no reason that if you can't understand language that you cannot understand language but still understand metaphysics, right? Like there's no reason that language understanding is required for understanding metaphysics, really, in the way that Seth is talking about.
No, I think you're right, but I think he's just highlighting like how we take some of this for granted.
Right.
Like, and I see that in myself. Like when you really try to like drill down and wonder like what is a thought or what is an idea, like it's less of a definite thing than the symbols that we have for them.
Yeah.
And therefore less of a definite thing than the symbols we have for them will make us feel like we have about them, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Gives us this false impression of like we actually know what we're doing. He's pointing out like you don't even realize how you're choosing from this like staggering pyramid of symbols.
Right.
And when you put it that way, it is, I mean, it becomes clear to me anyways.
Yeah. I mean, part of the takeaway from this is that like it's the thing we talked about a little bit earlier is that physical objects sort of have like a meaningfulness associated with them, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's leading us into this idea that we're creating our whole reality. And so therefore he's making the jump from the way we obviously form our own verbal thoughts and speech into the objects of the real world.
Right.
It's a big jump, but I think that's what we got to try to digest here.
Yeah. Do you want to read it or can I read it? I just want the audience to know how very pleased Seth is with himself. So after this extended like comparison of language and reality creation, Seth says, now you may take a break. And then in parentheses it says a smile. And then Seth says again, a note. I am very pleased. And then Rob asks, at what, Seth? And then Seth says, I am pleased with the beginning of my chapter, for I think I have hit upon an analogy and a true one that will release the reader from the artificial bondage of physical form. When he sees it as a method of his own expression, he will realize his own creativeness.
I always take, when he expresses such things, I'm like, well, why is he so pleased? And I think, I mean, it's a very tall task to like try to get us to wake up in this manner. And this is partly how I answer the question, like, why is he repeating himself so much?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you got to constantly chip away at this, I think.
Well, and he says there's the thing later on in the chapter where he's starting to talk about sort of like quantum physics stuff. And he's just straight up just like, all right, this is going to be really like broad strokes because like Jane doesn't understand this stuff, you know?
A couple times in this chapter, he says this is highly simplified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very understandable in that regard. I don't know. I find this to be like a very admirable part of Seth's personality, that he's like very open to just being like, I'm very happy with myself. I'm doing a good job.
Well, and he knows by now this is going in the book.
Yeah, right. He knows.
So there's something to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's that whole like emotional openness thing, you know?
I'm going to go back right before that quickly. It is only from this viewpoint that the true nature of physical matter can be understood. It is only by comprehending the nature of this constant translation of thoughts and desires, not into words now, but into physical objects, that you can realize your true independence from circumstance, time, and environment. That's kind of like the hidden power that he's suggesting we have if we can wake up in this manner, if we can understand things in this manner. Got any thoughts about this? This is something this chapter is pretty familiar to you, Liana.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, his overarch, I would say that if someone asked me to tell them what Seth's shtick was about, aside from understanding our multidimensional selves and knowing that we are more than just our human form, I think his main point across all the books is that physical reality is a reflection of our mental actions. So the world, we each have our own realities, and the physical world we see is just a reflection of our thoughts.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that the words that we produce are also a reflection of our thoughts, like in a similar manner. And I was just sitting here thinking, as you were talking, Joe, about quantum physics, that some would say that matter, like I think one of the theories in quantum physics is that matter is essentially like a waveform, or can be measured and seen as a waveform. But so can thoughts. That's what EEG machines do when you put those electrodes in your head. They're measuring like your thoughts as the electromagnetic activity that fires off your neurons. And spoken word, speech, is literally sound waves. It's all just waves.
Right.
I don't know I'm curious what Seth would have to say about the coincidence that all these things he's talking about, we often measure as a waveform.
Yeah. Be interesting if we could get like a guest physicist on the show at some point.
Yeah.
But the question that comes to mind right now is like, what are the differences from our current idea of physics, like between the wave in a thought and the wave in an object? And because I asked that because later in this chapter, Seth is going to talk about like that crossing of a threshold where it becomes an event or an object is kind of a matter of intensification. And I got stuck on the word quickly. Was it quickly? Yeah. He's saying like the more intense it is, the quicker it manifests.
Yeah, I got stuck on that part too.
And I was wondering, I just thought like it was interesting that it was like temporal.
Yes.
But I mean, that's maybe he's saying that because that's how we understand things probably. But like going back to the difference between the thought as a wave and the chair as a wave, is one of them quicker or more intense?
The way I see that is like if thoughts form matter, the more intense the thought, like if you imagine the matter or whatever event you're creating as a loading bar, the more intense the thought, the faster the loading bar. Or like what I'm thinking in my mind now is if you're boiling water on a stove, if you have it on low, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
If you crank the heat up all the way to high, it's gonna be a little faster because you're transferring more energy into the water.
Yeah. So the way I was thinking is like there can be a lot of things that we don't perceive that are just on that like slow boil point right now. And what we do perceive is that higher boil point. And it makes like our idea of the moment point or now just this inflection of where things are at in their own manifestation. Like everything is kind of here, but what the limited environment that we're perceiving as here is what's like, what's reached that threshold.
Yeah, and that really does resonate with at least my understanding of that interpretation you were talking about of quantum physics, where it is all talking about sort of like a possibility space. And then the event is sort of the resolution of that possibility space into an actual discrete event in a place and time,
Yeah.
Where like there is just like probabilities of events happening that are sort of getting carried through time all the time, but they need to be turned into events by in the scientific thing, I guess you would call it observation, but like the difference between observation and conscious creation is like very semantic,
Yeah. But it's cool that it exists, across these different understandings of the world, like it's the double slit experiment in physics and Seth is coming from a more broad, abstract, like psychological perspective.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting too. And we were talking about like intensity of like the wave, right? Because that literally is like what, like a more intense wave literally just has more energy in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like literally it is just like a very one-to-one translation of like, if you put more energy into this, it'll be a more intense wave. More energy means that it'll happen more likely.
Yeah, it helps you kind of come to grips with the idea that Seth is saying that, like, everything is kind of here. We're just like tuned into this narrow band of perception.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you can understand if you were more sensitive to those things, quote unquote, below the threshold, you'd be perceiving more.
That might be a good segue into the next part.
Yeah.
Because like if we're thinking about it as we're in this like thin band of the reality that actually exists, and there are sort of other dimensions that are not necessarily parallel with ours, there will be points where they intersect with our reality, right? And that intersection point is like the next half of the chapter, right? So it calls these coordinate points.
Yeah, very interesting.
Coordinate points are these locations in space and time where realities overlap with one another. So our physical reality is overlapping with some other kind of reality that's sort of coexisting with it at these points.
Yeah, here he says, these points are not recognized as such, but they are points of what you could call double reality, containing great energy potential. Coordinate points indeed, where realities merge. There are main coordinate points, pure mathematical sources of fantastic energy, and subordinate coordinate points, vast in number. And this next part is also curious to me because, skipping ahead, when Seth talks about like what his idea of God is, he brings up this kind of weird term to me, pyramid gestalts.
Weird.
Yeah. Like for some reason, that's how it's described.
Is it pyramid because it's like an ascending levels of order?
I mean, that would be my best guess that it like that top point is more connected with everything in the bottom than anything in the bottom is connected. In some sense like that.
Yeah.
But
here we're talking about literal pyramids. We're talking about the pyramids in Egypt.
Well, that's another angle. But the reason I was connecting it, he says next, there are 4 absolute coordinate points that intersect all realities. 4.
Right.
So like if you have 4 points, I think you could make like a triangular pyramid, right?
You can make a square pyramid. Oh, no, a triangular one. Yeah. You're right.
And I don't know if he's ever mentioned like if he's talking about square or triangular pyramids, or if this is even connected at all. Like here are ideas of like space are maybe like leading me down the wrong direction because he's definitely saying it's multidimensional. I think our way of thinking is so infused with like spatial analogies that I don't know if I can get outside of it to understand it in any different way.
Right.
I just thought that was curious. But Joe, so what's your impression of this idea of coordinate points?
It just makes me happy. I like it. It's just kooky. I love it so much. It's like all the UFOlogy, like spiritual science stuff of like, yeah, there's the Earth spirit grid, and like the pyramids are these super highly advanced like energy transference like portals, and there's like cyclones of like, esoteric like whatever going on. It's great. I love it. It's so kooky, and it's just in so much random esoterica. Like everyone loves the idea of the ley lines and the coordinate points.
Yeah, so like you're familiar with some of these ideas,
yeah,
like from other parts of the culture.
Yeah. It's fun.
I'm going to finish this paragraph here. These coordinate points also act as channels through which energy flows and as warps or invisible paths from one reality to another. They also act as transformers and provide much of the generating energy that makes creation continuous in your terms.
So if you go, listener, if you go to South America and you like find one of these jungle pyramid things and like climb to the top of it, and start having like just think very intensely and emotively, you can manifest things into the world. You have to go to the point so you can be the origin.
Yeah.
That's why they made them. That's why the ancient emperors would stand on top of the pyramids. They were literally creating reality.
What does he say later about the pyramids? Like just that, like the reason they've lasted so long is because they were placed on one of these.
They have like staying power because it like alters the physics around them, so they age like more slowly.
Yeah, they're just like made more solidly to begin with, and
they're like more. They're not denser, but they're like more real in a certain sense.
they're made with more intensity, and so it just, in our terms, it just takes longer for that intensity to like entropy.
Yeah, and if you're listening from America and you live on the West Coast, anywhere in the Great Lakes region or a couple places on the East Coast, just know people from the South and Southwest have less actual reality going on in their reality because they don't have the cool coordinate points around them. We have 2 by us, 3 actually. So like we're really real over here.
He's very generally, but I'm gonna list them off just so people are gonna be curious about this. The West Coast, portions of the East Coast. I thought that was interesting.
Only portions, not
The East Coast gets only portions. Utah, always loved Utah. The Great Lakes, the Chicago area, the Minneapolis area, and some other southwestern areas.
Oh, I guess the Southwest has
The
some too.
Southeast is left out there.
Yeah, if you're over in like Mississippi, Louisiana,
Yeah.
it's not as real over there, man.
They just have a more stable, slow existence, apparently.
Their loading bar just goes slower. You know, that's why they talk so slow.
Well, if you think of it practically, like it's probably a better place to have negative thoughts and ideas, and they don't manifest as quickly. You're kind of like in a safer zone in some sense. I don't know, like at what level, like the place that people end up, correlates to these ideas. But I mean, I didn't always live here. I came here, and I don't know. Maybe we talked about this on the pod before. Just how my experience of Minneapolis being here the last 5 years, like we had like COVID and George Floyd and like some major things happening here. It's a small sample size, but you can see like that was like a worldwide event.
Yeah, Minneapolis rising, man.
Reproductions.
Social reproduction.
It's just like the effects of that event will continue, at this point in history, affecting the whole world.
If you're a weird, cool person, move to Minneapolis.
I mean, people are moving here from other places for sure. I always joke with Daisy that we got to build a wall to keep the Californians.
All those Californians keep coming over here.
Yeah.
They're like, dang, you guys got water?
It's so novel. All right. So what are you thinking about this, Liana? Or like, what have you thought about it since you come across
definitely think New York City is a coordinate point. I asked Rick Stack this once. Rick Stack was one of the original New York boys referenced in the Seth a lot. Group of, I think, like 5 or so guys from New York who used to make the weekly drive on Tuesdays
for the
to Jane's ESC class. And he recorded hundreds of Seth sessions, and he was the reason behind a lot of the books that were published, early sessions, personal sessions. And I asked him recently, like, do you think New York City has a coordination point near it? And he laughed and he was like, oh yeah, multiple.
I would say, yeah, just jumping off from like what Seth is saying here, like I think, doesn't he say like kind of cities usually pop up on these places? Like,
yeah, makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it's areas of great activity such as Minneapolis, Chicago, Utah, New York City. I also think it's no coincidence that like Minneapolis has so many huge companies coming out of it. Like I'm not from here.
Yeah.
So when I found out that Target and 3M were based here, I was like, oh wow, I had no idea. Because to me, this is kind of in the middle of nowhere. No offense.
Yeah, there's a few of them.
Yeah. And like nothing else for hundreds of miles.
Oh yeah, right. You start driving in any other direction, you're like, wow.
Yeah, but like also the surrounding states.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not too much industry or big companies.
No offense to Wisconsin, I love y'all, but
yeah, very interesting. And you're from New York originally.
Yeah, and like everything in New York City is really old. The buildings are just really old, but they're still somehow intact. Like the subway system is so old, it's like falling apart, but still functional.
It's true. Like
you're like reading the hieroglyphs on the subway station, like, wow, how did this last the test of time?
I feel like there's limited serious podcasts just about like New York's like sewer system or something, like just the extraordinary achievement that is the sewer system of a city like that. It's amazing. New York is so obviously a coordinate point to me that it almost doesn't even bear mentioning.
Oh yeah, like it's such a like shining cultural like leader.
You can go anywhere in the world and eventually see someone that has an "I love New York" T-shirt or something.
Yeah, and you guys know that song "Empire State of Mind." Concrete jungle where dreams are made of. Like, New York is known for where people make their dreams come true. So many artists come out of New York, and I think it's because they're sitting on a giant coordination point. So if you have positive beliefs about yourself and your ability to make it, you're just sucking energy out of these points.
And those are the people that flock there, like it's the people in their, late teens or 20s or 30s, and they're going there to like, make their dream come true.
They've got creative energy that they're bringing to it. They have that like intense, vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
they want to make.
The coordination points around New York just serves as the catalyst for launching their career into the sky.
I always find it remarkable the size, like the population size of New York for its like importance. Because like population wise, it's actually like small for like mega cities. Like I don't even know if it counts as a mega city. Like if you're talking about things like Tokyo or like what would it be, like Manila or whatever?
Yeah, it's been interesting like watching population size just in my lifetime. Like it's amazing how fast some of these other cities around the world are growing.
Yeah.
But I know at least at one point it was definitely in that category. Maybe you can't quite put it there anymore.
Yeah. Like in terms of people, it's not even close.
So if you're going to take this stuff seriously, it behooves us to like, try to become more conscious of our thoughts, especially when we're in these places, and like our intentions, and, focus on what we're doing. If we're going to like, does that ring any bells? Or Joe, just reading this, I know you're new to this and not necessarily just accepting it, but like it does have that implication, right?
Yeah, it does. I think there was the very explicit call out that it's like, look, if you're one of these people who you experience your emotions like incredibly like strongly and deeply, like you have to work on channeling that into positive ways of thinking. Because like if not, it becomes like very self-destructive.
Yeah.
It
makes me think of like, I feel like almost everyone has like the friend that like ends up with like a certain type of bad partner. And they like are consciously trying to avoid that again. And they end up like attracting the same type of person. Yeah. Like over and over. It just makes me think like there's like a gap between the way they're like consciously connecting, like how do I find a different type of person between like the thoughts and feelings that they're giving, and that is attracting that type of person.
Right. Yeah. I feel like everyone has that friend too that's like, they're so sloppy and like their life is just like very chaotic all the time, but they have like that intensity about their person.
Yeah.
That it's like, it's truly like a wonderful thing about them that they can be so intense and have such deep feelings and experiences in the world. And I feel like these people tend to be like also very creative, like people, and it's like, there's that challenge of like, you wouldn't want them to be any other way because that's what makes them so wonderful. But it's like, you can see that it like often can like turn on itself, right? And become like just this deep sort of like an issue for their daily life.
Yeah. And I always wondered, do those people at a higher level, do they want this intense experience? And I think they
would choose it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like when you're on the roller coaster ride, I think that from the people that I know, when you're on the low point, they're often questioning, like, that really makes you question, like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? This sucks. Like, and it's easier, like, for better or worse, I'm a more even-keeled person. And sometimes a lot of times I think that's a good thing. But other times I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm experiencing joy nearly as intensely as some of these people that are doing it this other way.
Yeah.
But I've been able to like, some friends and partners that have been on this sort of more roller coaster way of doing things, point out to them like at their low points, like, do you remember yesterday when you were just like giggling because the trees were blooming? Like, do you remember that? And sometimes, they just get lost in that perspective. And because I'm kind of even, like I can point out that you're actually getting a lot of joy out of life, and so I do wonder sometimes, like, am I missing out because I'm so even keeled?
Yeah.
And it also makes me wonder about, Seth's idea of reincarnation. He talks, I happen to believe I'm the last incarnation. Do you believe that about yourself?
He said that once you realize your thoughts create reality, yes.
That's where you are?
Mm-hmm. That's the one.
I'm the first one.
You're a young soldier?
Yeah, baby soul. This is the first time around.
I feel like I think you're pretty advanced if you're a first time.
Yeah, some of us just do it one time and we get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. You're a prodigy.
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.